Hello, everyone, and welcome to Transforming Today's show. I'm Rebecca Weintraub, your host, and I'm an intuition coach. I help people discover, develop, and strengthen their intuition. And today I have the pleasure of having Kristen Zavo. How are you, Kristen?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here today. I cannot wait for us to dive in. Why don't you tell our viewers, just kind of on a high level, how you coach others?
So I really work with high achievers to help them build careers that are aligned with their skills and their passions and their priorities, and that leave them happy and fulfilled. At a
That's
high level, that's what I do.
I love it. And I
Yeah.
can't help but notice Job Joy, the book behind you on your bookshelf. What is that?
Yes, I recently wrote that book. It launched on Amazon in April, and it became an international bestseller. What?
Woo!
And even more exciting news, a big publisher picked it up, so it will be in print very soon and in bookstores early next year.
Oh my God, I am
Yes,
can I say I'm proud of you? That is so
yes.
awesome
Thank you.
for you. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. And to think back, like when this was just an idea, and it was like, and you were sketching things out and you were thinking, well, what themes will I put in? And how am I going to organize the chapters? And like, now look at where it is. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Oh, good for you. That's so awesome. So, all right. Well, I want to dive right in. I want to understand where you were before and how you got to this point where you're now coaching and you're basically walking the talk. You're doing what you do for your clients.
So should I start from the beginning?
You can start wherever you want.
Okay. So I was always a good girl. I followed the rules. In school, I got straight A's. I, figured out what to do to get the approval and, have my parents and everyone be proud of me. And, I graduated high school in 3 years. Then I went on to get, my bachelor's. I did double major psychology and business. And as if that wasn't enough, I did a mathematics minor and graduated before 20. So I was just a pusher, an achiever. And then I got my MBA in finance, and all the while I was teaching. And then my first postgraduate job was in investment banking. And then I moved to consulting, where I spent the majority of my career in finance and restructuring. So really helping bankrupt companies to come out of bankruptcy. So it was very high pressure, high stress. Everyone around you, we were like the Grim Reapers when we came into our clients. People didn't like to see us coming.
Mhm.
And then I switched careers again, and I spent some time in corporate strategy. So through each of these moves, and this is over the course of 18 years, I was teaching, consulting, banking, corporate strategist, and I learned, it took me a while, but I learned some things every time I changed jobs or changed careers. And, through trial and error and, some maturity and just testing, I was able to uncover a system to not just land a new job at your dream company, but also to really build a career that's aligned with all the other parts of your life and with who you really are, not who you were when you were 22 and you graduated school, not who your parents thought you were, but really who you are and where you are in your life now. And that's just so important, and a reason that so many of us are so unhappy and stuck in these soul crushing jobs. And so, all that pain that I went through, a lot of stress, a lot of tears, a lot of frustration. What's wrong with me? I'm successful. I had all the things, right? I had the title. I made really good money for a 20-something-year-old. I lived in New York City in a high-rise doorman building apartment. I wore the nice clothes. I traveled all over. From the outside, it looked like I had it all. But the rest of my life was lacking. And I was just deeply, deeply unhappy. And, towards the end, it even was affecting my health. I had always been very healthy. I had gained weight. I had very terrible migraines, like the type that knock you out for 2 weeks in bed, and they're putting you through for, MRIs. I was on 8 different pills at once for these headaches, and it was just out of control.
So what actually was the pain point? Because a lot of what you just described is
Yeah.
pretty painful. So what was it that actually helped you transition from that life to the one that you're living now?
So there were two big transitions. The first one was from consulting to corporate. So corporate was a lot more relaxed compared to everything I was used to. You know, I was working 6 days a week, sometimes 7, easily 80-hour weeks, which now you wonder, how is that even physically possible? But I was doing that. And I had a lot of of those major breakdown aha moments, but I had to be hit over the head multiple times to get it. Because even when everything's crashing down around you, it is scary to realize that you need to leave and not know what to do and feel stuck. You know, my education was in finance. I had 10 years in finance. What could I possibly do? All I knew was that I wasn't happy. But a couple of the moments, I've told the story before of, I would go to mass. There was this cute little chapel in the middle of Times Square. And that was my time once a week where I got 1 hour to be quiet. No one can argue with that, right? Your time with God. And I was in church one day and the tears started streaming down. And then it got, where you get all stuffed up and you're ugly crying and, you're in the middle of a pew and you can't get out. You got to wait till everyone stands up or kneels or whatever to make your exit. It was not a glamorous moment in my life, but I knew right there in that moment, I said to myself, if this is success, I want no part of it. So that was one moment. The epic 2-week migraine where I was begging my headache neurologist for Vicodin, not to make me feel good, but just so that I could move my head to the other pillow. That's how bad it was. And she said, absolutely not. And, what's left is we can start injecting Botox into your scalp. That was the next step. And after, a year plus of being on all these different pills, which then cause a whole host of other problems, that was a big wake up call to me. I was not the person who was getting stuff injected into my scalp for some reason. And I know people do that and it works for them and great, but for some reason that was a big wake up call. And I ended up finding an acupuncturist. At that point, I didn't believe in all the alternative methods. I was a very practical, logical person. And what saved me from the headaches was the acupuncture. And I think that was even part of me opening up to what could be other possibilities, right? Because I had seen this one path of success, and it wasn't working for me. And then, of course, all the things I was lacking. I wasn't dating. I wasn't able to have a relationship because I was traveling every week. Plus, on the weekend, I just wanted to be home and sleep and be on the couch. Even if I was with my laptop and working, I was not, I didn't have a full life. And, the older you get, you realize all the success in the world doesn't mean anything if you don't have anyone to share it with and you're alone. If you don't have people that care about you and that you care about, so a lot of realizations, and I'm probably forgetting some of them, but I had to be hit over the head multiple times. And, the health stuff was getting so out of control. When I finally left, we were in a project actually in Cincinnati where I live now. I was living in New York at the time. And one thing led to another. The travel was horrible and my team all got on a flight and they left me. And so I didn't have status, so I had to stay in Kentucky overnight, at this, bad little, I'm trying to think of a good word to say, but a bad little hotel close to the airport. And of course, the universe is laughing at me because now I live over here. But at the time it was I'm stuck in, godforsaken Kentucky all alone in the middle of the night. I didn't have any of my, shower stuff because when you're in consulting, you leave all your stuff at your hotel that you go back to every week. So I was sleeping in my clothes. I didn't have anything to brush my teeth. And, the next morning I got a flight out and I'm walking in my apartment door. It's been a hell of a night and all I want is a shower. And my boss is on the phone calling me saying, are you going to be on the phone? Are you going to be for this call? Mm-hmm. And I made a very big stand for myself and I didn't answer. And I got in the shower instead of the call. And that was the biggest rebellious act I could have done. And part of me was worried And then the other part of me was like, I deserve a shower. And so that was another one of those big moments of, I had reached my point and I was, in my little way, standing up for myself. So it wasn't much longer before I quit without a job. I had been helping out startups in New York through friends, but I didn't have a real job to go to. I didn't know what I was going to do. But I ended up, through a process that I can talk about later, but I ended up completely changing careers. I liked a lot of what I did. It was a lot better. For the first time in my life, I was traveling for fun. Mm-hmm. I took my first big international trip after I took this job at this big retailer. And it was the first time where I was away for like 2 weeks, which was huge. That was unheard of. I was afraid to take vacation in consulting because if you leave, you might miss the next big project, and then you're on the bench, and then you're not making money, and you basically owe at the end of the year. So there's this fear, and then you're not seen as, you're not loyal enough, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I got more into prioritizing the other parts of my life. So travel was a big one, friends was a big one, ultimately, finding love was a huge one. Mm-hmm. And, I did that, and now I was still in a high stress job, but it was nothing like what I was doing in New York. And, I had more wherewithal, like, my boss was an ex-consultant, so he would call me at 10 o'clock at night, but I wouldn't answer. I didn't have that fear. There's a fear when you're in consulting. I can't really explain it, but you're like afraid of what's going to happen. Or maybe that was just my younger self. But, so the situation had improved. I was doing a lot more of what I love. The people were a lot better, but I still, would get that itch. And then the company started going through restructuring. So the last, year or two that I was at this firm, every few months they would have these mass layoffs. And so, and if you weren't laid off, you were maybe moved somewhere else, or your group was moved somewhere else. And so there was a lot of change. There was a lot of uncertainty. People were stressed out, like very, very toxic. People on my team were asking me, should I be looking for a job? And honestly, I was helping them with their resumes. Mm-hmm. I was career coaching, my own team. Yeah. Which, on the side, I was doing, some career coaching, certainly not a full-time business. But as I had made all these changes, people had taken notice, like old colleagues, and especially friends I had made at clients, coworkers. And they would be like, well, how'd you do this? And should I go to this networking event? And can you look at my LinkedIn profile? And so that's how the coaching sort of started. But that was more of a hobby. It was something I did for fun. The teacher in me really liked it. And so I digress. But anyway, back in corporate, it had just become out of control. And I started feeling, my body started reacting again. Mm-hmm. I started, the Sunday blues turned into, a real dread about going in. And towards the end, I would be like sitting in the parking lot saying, oh my God, I don't want to go in. And I remember one time I was sitting there, I'm bargaining with myself, right? It's almost Friday. Listen, just make it till bonus time. Make it to the new year, because then your LinkedIn profile will look better, that you have the whole year. All these things, right? Oh, well, next week, your VP is going to be on vacation, so that'll be good. You're all just trying to bargain with myself to go in. And I get a text from my man, and he's like, I know you don't want to be there. I hope you have a good day. I'm thinking of you. And I wrote him and I said, I'm actually in the parking lot, willing myself to go in right now. And then he sent me the song Eye of the Tiger. You know the song? So can you imagine, like, and it was funny, but it was like I needed a theme song just to get my butt in the doors of that office. And while it was funny, it kind of felt empowering. Sad enough, like that you've got to put up your armor and have a boxing theme song just to face the day. And so when I saw this happening again, I knew it was time. And so then it was just a matter of when. And as far as the book, I always knew I wanted to write a book since I was probably a teenager. I didn't know what it would be on, but I always knew a book was in me. The timing was kind of perfect. If I was going to do this, now was the time. It's now or never. And so I wrote the book, and then everything just flowed. Like, since I wrote the book, it made sense. I was talking to more people, and I decided to actually go for it and do what I had been doing for fun full time, and actually follow my own advice, right? Live what is authentic to me, not what looks successful to other people, because I had this whole idea of what success looked like, and that was a corporate job.
So the one word that keeps ringing in my head this whole time is surrender. And when you talked about that moment when you had gotten home after the travel and all you wanted to do was take that shower and your boss was calling, you talked about standing up for yourself. And I'd like you to talk about the relationship between standing up for yourself and at the same time surrendering. Usually those two may not always go together, but it seemed like some of both had to happen in order for this new recipe for your life to transpire. We talk a little bit about maybe both of those and how they did or didn't kind of work together.
That's a really interesting question. I haven't thought of it that way before. Standing up for yourself and surrendering. So the way I see it, and I might think differently as I talk this out, I'm kind of talking out loud, but it's surrendering to who you really are and what you really desire and what you deserve and what feels good, rather than resisting that.
Mm-hmm.
And as you surrender to what's true for you, that gives you strength to maybe stand up to things that are against that, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm wondering what that felt like, because I'm assuming from the story that you told us, it may not have happened either that much, or it was a really long time until that point where it happened so dramatically. So after kind of putting your head down and going to get to the point where you put your head up and stood on your own 2 feet and said, this is really what I want. What did that actually feel like when that moment happened?
well, the drama was really all on my side. I don't think other people felt the drama as much as I did, right? Because it's all in your head. What am I going to do? But you put on a good face, right? You're a good soldier. And I had stood up other times in my career, and I'm proud of my younger self for that. But I had to be pushed. Like, I had to really feel like someone was pushing me to do that, or that it was absolutely necessary. But standing up for myself or making a decision, declaring what I want and going for it, that feels good and it feels scary. It's exciting and it's terrifying, right? Because you're doing something brand new, and nobody in my immediate circle could say, yeah, I've done that before. My circle was telling me, whoa, the economy's not good. You have a fantastic job with a fantastic company. What are you doing? I mean, when I told my mom that I was quitting, she told me, let's not tell your father because he's going to have a heart attack. No pressure, right?
I mean, that's a box that's really hard to step out of,
Yeah,
right?
and
Because to most people, you've got everything, but most people don't go home with you and are sitting on your couch on a Friday night where you're crying saying, why don't I have anybody that loves me? You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, I can relate to that in a very different way, where I was in this spiritual group and I had removed myself so much from reality and my real life that when I met my husband and he first asked me, do you want to go out on Friday night? I couldn't. Like, I had too much responsibility. And it was like I want to know, like, from your perspective, and this is for people who are in a similar place where they're just getting really tired right now. They're getting run down, like they've had enough. That pretty little box that looks so pretty on the outside, when we take off the cover and it's like a mess inside, that fear that's around, like, basically just smashing that box and saying it doesn't exist anymore. Please talk about that fear and how you help your clients navigate that fear so that it doesn't exist anymore.
Well, it will always exist.
Okay.
The fear still exists for me. So that's number one, realizing the fear, the stress will always be there, but are you doing something that's worthwhile, or are you fulfilling someone else's dream? So that would be number one. If you're doing big things, there will always be fear. Do you agree?
Yeah, until the point of where, like, the fear can be there, but it can be neutralized, right?
Sure.
Like I actually help people process fear. That's part of the intuition work that I do. And the best that can happen is we neutralize it. It's still going to be there, but it can be a friend, or it can just be like something hanging out with you rather than something like coming at you and you're freaked out, right? Because we're human. It's going to always, fear is always going to be there. But I think there is a way to neutralize certain fears.
For sure. But you're setting yourself up for disappointment if you think that you can conquer your fear and it's gone forever. But so, yeah, absolutely, talking to your fear like you talk to your inner critic, right? Oh, hi, it's nice to see you. Actually, I'm good. Yeah, thanks for the help. Thanks for telling me I'm going to fail, but I've got this. Thank you. And I've read books. I'm thinking of the one, Tara Moore's book, Playing Big. And she says, give it a name. Give your inner critic, your fear, that voice inside you, give her a name, or him a name, and really think of it as, because it is like something separate outside of you.
Mine's the marketer. That's what I call him. Because he's always like, hey, come over here. Like, we're going to do this. Like, come do this. It's going to be so much better than what you're doing. Why would you want to do that? Like, I call him the marketer.
That is so funny. Yeah, I never came up with a name for mine, but I do talk to her. Anyway, so realizing, I know now that I'm, going to be signed up for having multiple personalities, now I can continue with the interview. So realizing that is just one part of you, right? That is not all of you. What we really do at the very beginning is connect with that person's why. What is important to them? How do they want to feel? And really those two things, and what is it that they want to do in this life, even if it's, I was talking to a brand new client. She left her job over the weekend, actually, and she was thinking about, should she go back and do consulting work? And we had talked about, how do you want to feel? She said, I want to feel empowered. I want to have more fun. I want to be making memories. She looked back and she couldn't think of any memories because she's always working, right? She said, I want to feel like I've set my boundaries. And so then, hours later, we're talking about, she's messaging me about getting in touch with, this old boss. And I said, okay, remember what we just talked about. Does this make you feel empowered, right? Does this make you feel like you have a choice? Do you feel good about this? Is this fun? Is this going to empower you? Is this going to enable you to make those memories and connections that we talked about? And always coming back to, how do I want to feel? Who do I want to be in any big decision you're making? And, so that would be one thing. And that's something I come back to often. And then, having your future self give you some advice. That's another one of my absolute favorite tricks, because your future self is pretty wise. Right? So if you say, what would fast forward 20 years, right? And so if someone's 30, you say, what would my 50-year-old self say? I bet you, and this is with anyone I've talked to, she's going to say, go for what you want to do. Don't stay in this job. And then of course, so there's all this mindset work. Absolutely. And then I'm a very logical person. So we have a plan. We're not just meditating and using the law of attraction, which is fantastic, but we've got a plan. Where do you want to get? How are we going to get there long-term, short-term? And what do you need to be doing every single day? What are the 5 things you need to be doing every day? And that includes the work stuff, the job hunting stuff, the research. So really refining what it is, because you might know your overall purpose, but not what you want to be doing or where you want to be going. And so there's a lot of work that goes into that rather than having a job choose you. A lot of really smart, successful people, they get along in life because they're offered jobs and they sort of flow into things, right? And it's not an intentional choice. And so being intentional, figuring out what you want, and then going after that. And there's a plan. And then also when it comes to fear, worst case scenario, you can always go back to your old job. If I wanted to go back to consulting now, that wouldn't be a problem. But give it a try. Give what is calling out to you, what's causing you all this pain, give it a shot. You know?
So I wonder how much, okay, so when you were younger, you talked about how you were not just a go-getter, but like it seemed like your drive was really strong. I mean, not just about the degrees, but in order to get those degrees, like you have to be working very, very hard. You've got multiple things going on. You're managing a lot all at the same time. Your schedule is completely booked. And so is there a way to, if that's your natural like self, if that's your natural drive, like, is there a way to still have that drive exist, but in sort of a space that's slowed down or provides more time for yourself with that balance of work and life? How does your drive still show up, but in a more relaxed and more suited space for you?
Yeah, if you're that way, and this is everyone I work with, it's not just myself, like the people I work with, they tend to be hardcore, super driven people. So they're workaholics and you might blame your job. I blame my job. But even when I quit in consulting, I still somehow spent 10 hours a day job searching. So it was my fault too, right? And that's just what you're talking about. It's your habit, right? So you can be very intentional and give these things a shot, try them out, and then pay attention to how you feel, right? Planning it in your day. We high achievers, we like a plan. We like a schedule, right? So schedule in your workout, schedule in your time where you're allowed to read, and consider an appointment just like you would any other meeting. But I think it's something we always have to work with. I think as you get older, naturally your priorities change a little bit, right? If you find, you're a person, if you have kids, what is most important to you changes. And so naturally you might relax a little. Or something painful might need to happen in order for you to realize you need to relax a bit. Everyone in consulting was getting a divorce. A lot of the men I worked with, they loved their job because it allowed them to escape their family for 4 or 5 days a week. And getting divorced or having something bad happen sometimes has to be your wake-up call. But I think for the majority of us, time and maturity for sure help us. Giving it a try, paying attention to the results. And then when we find ourselves getting back in that habit again, and we all do it, I do it. I remember writing, I have a whole self-care section in my book, and I was writing the self-care section, and in it is, are you getting enough sleep? Are you moving around? All this good stuff. And, I remember one of those days I woke up and, I had deadlines for my chapters. And I was like, before I jump in the shower, I'm just going to type out a little. And, it's 3 p.m. and I'm still in bed. And I've been typing this whole time. And then John comes again and he's like, yes, so are you following the advice in your book? Have you eaten yet? Right. And so even when we're hyper aware of it, even when we know better, even when it's what we advise clients to do, it's very easy to get caught up in that. So it's got to be a practice, just like you're not always motivated and you got to work on that all the time. Just like you got to take a shower every day. You have to remind yourself of what's important every day. And when you fall back into it, that's fine, but just put it back on the plan and make it a priority. And it doesn't have to be huge. I'm not talking about taking an hour bath with rose petals every night.
That sounds great.
That sounds awesome. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about giving yourself 15 minutes in the morning. And I even recently I did a live on I think it was actually on self-care. It was one of the happiness hacks I was talking about. And I talked about the morning routine, and someone wrote, oh yeah, I don't have 15 minutes in the morning because I have a long commute. And I said, give yourself 3 minutes. Because if you have no morning routine, I say, 5 minutes of journaling, 5 minutes of meditation, and 5 minutes of reading. Do 1 minute of each. Make it a 3 minute. But you have to prioritize yourself in the morning. You have to center yourself. You've got to be consuming good content. And even just a little thing like that can set your day off on the right path. So it's got to become a routine, like brushing your teeth. You never say, oh, I'm too tired, I'm too busy, I'm not going to brush my teeth before I go to bed. Or maybe you do. I don't know, but I always brush my teeth. or like, right, take off your makeup. Every once in a while, maybe you don't, but you know better, and normally you do. I need to come up with a guy example in here.
This is hysterical. Okay, so let me ask you this. When you were talking about how you were like typing away, like to me, the word I hear is flow, right? Like like when we're working on different projects, especially when they're very creative, we can get into this flow. And I classify it as an intuitive flow. Because I believe when our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual sort of dimensions are balanced, we kind of get into this channel where everything opens up, any blockages or distractions or anything kind of like move to the side, and it's this open channel of flow. I've gotten in trouble before because my flow has been so strong and so intense that it has pushed important things or other responsibilities to the side. And so I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think like if a lot of your clients or just any of our viewers are listening today, a lot of us are going to want to go from a corporate setting or something like that that's like high intensity to something maybe more relaxed and possibly more creative, something that brings out that sort of part of our brain or that need to just create something, produce something. How do you balance, like if you're a driven person like you are and the people that you work with, how do you balance that drive with that flow that just comes through? I know you kind of already answered it by like scheduling and stuff, but if you've really got that flow coming on, let's say you are writing that book and you just cannot stop because it's like going. How, I guess more my question is, how do you trust that flow will come back? Or how do you pause it in a way where you can eat, because that's a basic human need, to then open it up again and continue? Do you have experience with kind of pausing and trusting and letting it flow?
Yeah, I think depending on the project, sometimes it's fine to let it flow. And that's where it's important to have the people around you supporting you. When I was really getting close to the deadline, I went to an Airbnb. I needed to be alone. I needed to be able to work all day. And of course, if you schedule it, sometimes the flow doesn't come, right? Yeah. Flow doesn't work on a schedule. But if it's coming and the people around you support you and get you, then when it's there and it's big and this is not just you wanting to hide in your work, because there's a difference between workaholics work a lot because they're comfortable working and it means they don't have to deal with other stuff, even if they don't know that's what they're doing. And that's a huge, I'm thinking of someone that I'm working with that doesn't have a job and she still somehow is working all day. And the question is, what if you were to sit down and not work? What comes up? And we're not to that point yet, being able to answer that. But that's scary. So making sure that your flow truly is flow, not just you working and hiding, right? Because, and I could go on and on about flow, but I think number one, when it's there and it's a project and there's a deadline, definitely go with it. But being able to, feel the difference between that and hiding, and having the people around you understand and support you. So that would be number one. And then, was there another part of this question? I feel like I've gone on a tangent.
Not really, but now I'm really
making sure you get your needs met, I think you said. right? Oh, and how you get the flow back. That was the other part of the question. That's where the morning practice and that connection with yourself, with God, they're kind of one and the same, I think. That connection and that trust comes from when you sit down, it will come back. It's not going anywhere, but you have to stay connected. And will you have an off day now or then? Yes. And you give it a break and you move on and you do something else. Absolutely. But if you're aligned, that passion, that intuition, all the stuff you want to get on the piece of paper or whatever project you're working on, it's not going to go away. It's all inside you. Everything, right? The answer to anything is it's inside you.
And I think like for me, like I'm also writing a book right now, and
Congrats.
thanks. I had to put it down because I was in tune with my flow, and I realized like I went to work on it one day, and it didn't, for whatever reason, it didn't like I got indicators that I shouldn't work on it. And so I put it down for that one day. And after taking that time, I realized, wait a minute, like this book is about something else.
Wow.
Like it still includes what I've been writing about, but it should come from a different angle. Right. And then it was like, wait, I need a little more research on this in order to prove this theory that I have. And so I can't, like, I just had a week off at the beginning, like for 4th of July, I just had that off, and I dedicated my whole entire week off to writing this book.
Ooh.
And it occurs to me now that we're talking, it's like, oh gosh, am I a workaholic? Or was that just something I wanted to do and it was flowing, so I was working 8 hours a day on it, right?
I think it could be both. It's different for all of us, no? You're multi-passionate. And especially, you took advantage of time that you took off from work.
But I also had my husband saying, can we go to the beach? Can we go to the beach? Can we go to the beach?
That was my next question. Did you play?
I did. I balanced it, but looking back, I was almost like, maybe I should have taken that time to take a break, because we all, like, the firm was like, you guys all need a break. Like, just take this off, detach, like be with your families or whatever. And I gave myself a project. Now, the project I couldn't really focus a lot on while I'm working full time, of course, and while I'm coaching and doing other things. So in my mind, it was like, oh, I'll spend. But it's interesting when you were talking about the workaholic versus just letting that flow happen and going with the flow, so to speak. And in my mind, I was like, yeah, it's an or. It's like one or the other, but it could be an and. It's an and for some people.
Yeah.
And so if it's an and for some people, and now you're transitioning them into this new world, like whatever they want to create, whether it's their own business or just a different job, how are you coaching them to find even that balance? Because I know you mentioned that most of the people you work with are like that high intensity. Do you find that you're coaching them into a lower intensity, or are you finding that they're still high intensity, but it just looks different?
It looks different, or it's in a different direction. It could calm down, of course, but people who are intense, they're usually intense everywhere, right? If you go all in at work, if you have a relationship, you probably go all in. And it really starts, even though everything that I work on is focused on career is a key component of life, and it affects everything else. If you have a great career, but the rest of your life is horrible, then it doesn't really matter. If the rest of your life, is horrible and you have a great career, that can feel empty too. So when we start out, we're looking at all parts of life, where you are and where you want to be. And then everything is designed around that.
Mm.
And sometimes the workaholic is going to have to close the laptop at 6 o'clock and say, no, I said I wanted to spend more time with my wife and children, and commit to that, and then see the positive benefits, right? It's it's a reward system, but it's something that, and even if that means then at night you spend an hour and you catch up on email, and then you realize the whole world doesn't end because you're not working, 13, 14-hour days. It doesn't. And you actually, when you set some boundaries and you get a life, you get a little respect,
Mm.
and you're more productive with the hours you are at work.
Yeah.
So you can show up as your best self in all areas.
So I feel like a little bit we might be talking about addiction, just because a lot of people you could classify a workaholic as like being addicted to work, right?
Oh yeah.
So when you're helping these people transition from sort of a workaholic scenario into the I'm shutting my laptop at 6 to spend time with my family, are you experiencing with them what that feels like? Do a lot of people that you come in contact with and that you work with have a huge struggle with being able to do that? And if so, what is that like for them and for you when you're working with them?
Absolutely. And it is an addiction for sure. And it's not something you change overnight. We don't have one session, we plan out your week, and all of a sudden you're balanced and happy and everything's perfect. And I don't think anyone expects that, but you can start with tiny things. But it's absolutely a struggle. It's hard because we get that adrenaline rush when we're working like crazy, right? We're getting that positive feedback, even if it's all in our head, just like you said, just like an addiction. So it's very hard to break. But by the time they get to me, something else is painful enough that they're willing to at least listen, at least consider, at least take a baby step. And so, yes, it takes time, absolutely. And just like an addiction, people fall back into it. I mean,
Mhm.
I fall back into into being a workaholic, and you have people around you to remind you. And that's why what we do at the very beginning, the foundation, is your why and your priorities. Who do you want to be and how do you want to feel? And whenever you're struggling, that's what you have to come back to. And that's why it's so important that you really get to that in an authentic way and don't speed through that process, right? Because when people come to me, they just want the new job, or they just deserve to get promoted, or they just want to change careers. But the problem is taking action for action's sake, which I'm guilty of. I was sick of finance, so what did I do? I went and I got my CFA, which is like harder than an MBA. Why? Because I wanted to do something and I thought it would help me get out of there, but it makes no sense. And that's taking action, which feels good in the moment. But when you're taking it for action's sake and it's not aligned with what you truly desire, what you truly want, then you're going to end up unhappy. The circumstances will change. You're going to think it's going to be better. You're going to adapt, and you're going to go back to your miserable, feeling. So it's work, and really connecting with that why. Even figuring out 3 or 4 words and having that every morning. What am I doing today? Is it making me feel ABC?
So let's talk about like the post transition. Let's talk about the client or yourself. Like now you've done that very hard work. If you were the workaholic, it's like you somehow broke the patterns and the behaviors and the thinking that had you locked into this sort of box, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now the box is open. We've untangled the mess. The box doesn't exist anymore, or if it does exist, it's a box that you created and that you love, and you're contained
Yes.
nicely within. Like, what is it like for you and your clients to just look back and say, wow, that was a lot of work. It was so worth it. And this is what I'm enjoying now. What is the this?
This is number one, I'm happy. All the stuff we do, all our goals, all the stuff we're running away from or we're running towards, we just want to be happy. So that's number one. Do I feel happy? Do I feel good? Connection, happiness. Do I feel fulfilled? it's more what it feels like than what it looks like. Because to an outsider, you're still going to work, you're still being successful, you're still hitting deadlines, you're still doing all the stuff. But your connections with people and your connection with yourself is completely different. And I think people get there and you almost don't realize it, which is why it's good to have someone, point out, wait, this is where you were, 3 months ago. Remember when you said, this is how I feel, this is how I want to feel, right? And as you check in with that, it changes. And you become a different person and you don't even realize it. So it's something to be celebrated, something to be acknowledged, because that's another thing. Super successful people, they never take time to celebrate, right? You can't, you'll jinx yourself. And anyway, you got to work towards the next goal. This is no big deal, right? And so taking that time and having, someone to tell you while you're planning your next goal, wait a minute, stop, pause. Remember where you were? A few months ago, a year ago, I was a completely different person. If I think of myself consulting days, completely different, in so many ways, but certainly priorities and, a calmness, and just being true to myself.
Yeah. How have you changed? Like, what are you noticing now that wasn't present before in yourself?
I'm definitely more aware of myself, my feelings, why I will talk through with myself, walk through, journal through whatever I'm going through, and I have that awareness to really get to what is it that's really bothering me. So awareness is number one. I have a lot more tools. I've done a lot of work, so we all still get caught up in things and stuff and feelings, right? But being able to get out of it a lot faster, getting upset and, kind of feeling depressed was something that was really hard to get out of. And I could work myself up into all the things that weren't fair. And I had plenty of friends who would help me work myself up. And we'd all talk about how miserable everything is. Can you believe so-and-so? And do you remember what he did to you? And absolutely, you could work yourself up, but that's one way to handle it. And now that's not what I do, right? I come back to worrying about myself. What does this say about me, right? How can I change in the future if I need to? And then letting the feelings pass faster. That's a big one. I think acknowledging them, understanding them, and then letting them pass and move on. It's probably the biggest, the awareness and the feelings.
What's your favorite thing about this new life that you have?
So much. I get to help people. So much of my work, and I would make meaning out of it. So I will give myself credit there, but so much of my work in consulting, I would be working on spreadsheets all day. I was an Excel guru, working on PowerPoint presentations, edits over and over. This font isn't right. It was insane. The amount of hours and the amount of money that was charged for me to do whatever I was doing. And then they'd look at it for 2 minutes. That felt like it didn't have any meaning. And that was one of the reasons I kept, moving careers. The last, company I worked for, they sold stuff, and I saw behind the curtains and I didn't really like it. And so, when I needed to find my bigger why, I found that through helping develop my team, essentially through coaching my team. So that was my why, not the selling stuff. So that's a big piece, that I get to help people to make their lives better, because when you can live authentically in your career, when you can first be honest with yourself, which is one of the most courageous and difficult things to do. I'm not saying even with anyone else, just with yourself. What is it that I want? Because we are so conditioned, we think that all this other stuff is our own mind, but it's not. So when you can first be honest with yourself, and then you can take the huge courageous step to declare and take action on it, it affects everything else. Yes, you're happier and more fulfilled in your career, but it goes into every other part of life. And so basically I work with people to start authentically living, starting with their career. And once you do that, you can't be inauthentic anywhere else. It just, once you see how it feels. So, helping people move through that journey faster than my 18 years, that is hugely satisfying and exciting to me. And then of course all the fun stuff, the freedom. I care about what I do. So every job has stress. And there's a great Mark Manson article, I can't think of what it is, but he talks about having like I'll say a junk sandwich, but basically it's like having something, we'll say a junk sandwich. And what he's saying is that no matter what you do, if you have the best job in the world, you got to eat something you don't like. There are going to be parts that are not fun, that are stressful, that suck. And so if you're going to be doing that, and think about it, you have stress, whether you are a barista at Starbucks, whether you work in a store, or you are CEO of a company. Each one of them could tell you the very real stress. Why not be doing something that you actually care about and that actually matters to you? So that's the best part.
Yeah, and I like what you said. Like, there's a lot of different ways that we can organize our lives. Big parts of our lives are, obviously work, relationships that we have, the fun, exciting things that we do, our hobbies, right? There's a family, there's all these different components. And when you put it in terms of like using almost work as like sort of the hub, like the center, and then kind of having like integrating the spokes around that hub, what is that integrative work like?
Well, can I speak to why the career is the hub first?
You can do whatever you want, except where.
I've been good so far.
You're great. No, you were fantastic. Yes.
I'm not a big swearer, but when you tell me I can't do something, what do I want to do?
You want to do it. Yeah.
Don't touch the red button. So, the reason career is a great place to start is, if you think about it, career, livelihood, influence, it's a core need. If you were to, it's survival. If we're not working, if we aren't making money, we don't have a roof overhead, we can't provide for a family, we can't eat. And you can't focus on all the other things if you don't have that very basic core need met. And so when you can fix the career, that's why career is a great place to start. And it involves all the other stuff, right? You talk about relationships. Well, there's relationships at work, right? I would argue play and fun should be at work. But if you think of all the different, your health, right? Your mental, your physical, your emotional health, all of that is affected by work, and vice versa. Your life is so that's why it's a great place to start. But how it's integrated is, when you make a change in one part of your life, we usually start to see the pattern, right? What we're doing in one area is connected to others. So I was recently talking to a client, and we started working on career, and stuff came up about his ex. They had been divorced for a very long time, but she was very controlling, made him feel like he, wasn't worth anything, all that good stuff that you imagine in the worst possible relationship ever. And guess what? He didn't value himself. And in his career, he wasn't valued. He was taking on way more responsibility. He was doing, very high level work at a low level pay and a low level title. And once he worked on that relationship with the ex, things started to change at work. It's all connected. And so when we change and we set up the boundaries and we stand up for ourselves and we get that self-confidence in one area, it helps the other. So you don't know what order it's going to go in. In this case, it kind of was reverse. But now it's not even standing up for himself. People are reflecting that back to him. He's getting calls for much higher level positions at much higher salaries. And he connected that this all started with what we talked about with his ex. not letting her scream at him for 20 minutes on the phone, right? Standing up for yourself and, having a conversation peer to peer. And all of that's connected. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I kind of went off on a tangent. But that's why starting with career really helps and can affect the rest of your life.
Yeah, I love how you answered that, actually, because this is something that I say to coaches all the time. And I because whether I'm connecting with them or we have bartering sessions or I've hired them or they've hired me, or even on Transforming Today show, I always find that coaching tells us to find a niche so that we can do something specific. It's easier to market. It's easier for people to find, what we do. At the end of the day, we all do the same thing. We just approach it differently. And I love how you answered that, because he could have maybe gone to a relationship coach or like a divorce coach or something like that, right? And it could have come in the same result and eventually affected his job too, right? But he happened to come to you, and you happened to see that connection with him, and you were able to help that integration in the rest of his life. And I love that, because and this is why I do the show. We all have such special gifts, and we all have something to offer. And there are so many needs out there for coaching, and people don't even really realize that coaching would actually solve their needs or help them get to the place where they want to go. And so if there are others out there that want to connect with you and want to hire you as their coach, and they want to transform their lives, Kristen, how would they get a hold of you?
Well, you can email me at kristen@findyourjobjoy.com, or you can go to findyourjobjoy.com, the website, and there's a connect with me link there as well.
Okay, perfect. And if they want your Job Joy book, how do they get that?
Well, it's on Amazon, but for your viewers, I would love to gift them a complimentary copy. So just send me an email.
Oh, I love it. Do I get one too?
Absolutely.
I knew you wouldn't say no on camera, so.
I'm surprised I haven't given it to you yet, actually.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. So thank you for being on. I really appreciate your time today. And I want to thank our viewers. This was such a special episode. I hope you fell in love with Kristen just as much as I did, because Kristen clearly knows what she's talking about. Not only does she have all of the degrees and, the background and the work experience, like she lived this. She knows what it's like. She can empathize with you. So if you are in this scenario, if you're in a situation where it's not perfect for you, and you know that something else would be more fulfilling, would bring you that happiness, would bring you that joy, connect with Kristen, reach out to her. So I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you come next time, and we'll see you then. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Kristen. Bye.
Bye.
What do you mean you'll be the oldest one there?
When we got together for the panel, I was looking around and I felt pretty old. Like people in their 20s.
You look like you're in your 20s.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm not.
Oh, I don't have Instagram.
Twitter.
No, it's too much. Like, you have to understand, like.
I just added Twitter to my, because people were looking me up on Twitter. They were asking for me for my handle, and I hadn't touched it. And
that's years. When you do Twitter, but nobody's asking for me on Twitter.
There's not a secret side of me that I'm afraid people are going to see.
Okay. If there is, it's coming out today.
We'll see.